Yeah, we're ready.
Anyway,
So I thought for a whole lot of reasons, Hashgacha Protest reasons, I thought we'd do something rather than a sikha tonight. We'd do something much harder. I say harder, not that the words are hard, or it's not deep Kabbalah or anything that is intellectually beyond anybody with ease, but it's very difficult because to achieve this level that we're going to learn about is really unimaginably difficult. And we're going to, much of what I'm going to be saying tonight, we've learned together in side roads, in tributaries, but I thought it's time that we learned the real basic guts of this in the proper place, which is volume, which is, excuse me, the 11th letter of the Igeris HaKodesh of Tanya, which is called Lahaskil Bina. Lahaskil Bina means to, it's a quote from Tanakh, where the angel Gabriel says to Daniel, I'm going to teach you how to think and teach you real wisdom. So that the Alter Rebbe has this chapter called, and there are two chapters in Tanya that vie for the most difficult. This is one, and I think probably most people would say this is the hardest. The other one that for me, nobody's interested in my opinion, but I'm just sharing with you that for me, the other most difficult one is chapter Lamed Beis of Tanya, which is on Avos Yisrael, and how you have to love every Jew like you love yourself, and you have to make the same excuses for every other Jew as you do for yourself. And at a practical level, maybe theoretically that sounds good, but at a real action level, I find that very, very difficult. I mean, but we're not doing that chapter tonight. We're doing the Haskila Bina, which is about this. Let me tell you. This chapter advises a Jew how to live with the wisdom of tolerating suffering. This chapter is about suffering, and suffering is something that our knee-jerk reaction is that it's horrific, as it is, and that we spend our lives trying to avoid it, as we should, and but what the Alter Rebbe does in this chapter is set out in straightforward serial steps how you and I as Jews, as believers in our God, and who share a daily communication with our God, how we should manage suffering. And not only manage it, but you have to understand the horrific depth of what we're talking about. That at the end of the day, it's not a matter of managing it, it's a matter of being happy, joyful, all the time. A Jew has an obligation, al pi Torah, to be grateful to his God and happy all the time. And the Alter Rebbe says, there's almost no patience when you learn this Perek well, this chapter well, there's almost no patience for any whining or any excuses, or for the Alter Rebbe, it's very clear. There is no such thing as bad. So tune into the good, and you think you're suffering. Well, let's learn that you're not. And basically, that's what this chapter is. Now, we've done aspects of this in the Shir many times. We've looked at different aspects of it. There's people who think of themselves as victims. There are people who get angry. There are people who are disappointed. There are people who are depressed. All of that we have learned together are peripheral to this chapter. This chapter takes it head on and says, we are going to discuss suffering and recognize that it may feel bad, but it isn't bad, it's good. And I want to teach you, says the Alter Rebbe, to see that it's good. So it's a tall order, and I want, Chabad does what's called Hitas every day, which is a portion of Torah, a portion of Tanya, a portion of Tilim. And we complete the Tanya every year. We finish Yud Tes Kislev is coming in a couple of weeks, and we start the Tanya again at that time. So I've been learning 50 odd years. I've been through Tanya 50 odd times. I've been through this chapter 50 odd times, and I want to tell you that I don't believe it's any easier now than it was the first time I read it. First of all, the first time I read it, I didn't understand it, but now I understand it a bit better, at least the words. And I assure you that the carrying out of this instruction that the Rebbe gives remains very difficult. And I don't know how many people in the world can really do it. Let me just give you a simple example. If you want to learn the way that we're going to learn this chapter together tonight, theoretically, if I said to you, do you ever feel disappointment? Let's not talk about suffering now. Let's talk about disappointment. I think I may have shared in the Shir once. I had a conversation I was learning with one of my grandsons. He was in YG, and we were talking about disappointment. I gave him the example that, because those kids in YG are always hungry. So after Seder, they often go down to this place called Danieli's, and they get hamburgers, or burgers. So he went to, I said, imagine you're going down to Danieli's, you're hungry, and you're looking forward to your burger, and you get there and there's none left, right? Do you feel disappointment? He said, of course, Sadie, of course I feel disappointment. I said, but if you believe in God and you believe that God's recreating the world every moment, and everything is happening by design and by Hashgacha Pratis, do you believe that? Yes, Sadie. I said, so therefore, it must be that Hashem's creating this situation, right? So where is there room for disappointment? Come on, Sadie, get real. And that's the issue. The issue is that when I go through this stuff with you, your default position, if you're normal, my default position is get real. I mean, can you do you know anyone who can really do this? Now, the answer is that there are probably very few people that can do it, but as a signpost, it's an incredible thing, because it is the pathway to total happiness and serenity. That's a big ask in a life where we're plagued by ordinary Gashmias problems and difficulties, and which come up every single, I don't need to tell anybody, there's a cocktail of it every day waiting for each one of us. And yet, there is a way of training one's perspective. Some people better, some people worse, but by practice, there is definitely, everybody can testify that definitely one can improve and get closer and closer to this goal. The goal in itself is very, very hard and very, very far. So let's go through it. So l'chaim. So the first thing that we have to understand, this letter is about how to deal with suffering. Now we're talking about real suffering. We're not talking about somebody's got a better lounge room suite than I have, or better dinner than I have. We're talking about basically, the Rebbe's talking about the three brachas. Everybody here knows that there are three brachas which are necessary for gratification in life. One is children, that's the most important. The second is health, very important. Third is money. You want to have nachas from your children. There's no greater joy than having children that you're proud of. Everybody wants to have good health. We live in terror of horrible diagnoses for good reason. We want good health, and finally, everybody needs money. You get some people are attached to it more than other people, but everybody needs it, and everybody knows all the jokes about I've been rich and I've been poor, and rich is better than poor, and I'd rather be unhappy and rich than unhappy and poor, and etc. So it's no news to anybody that we need all of those three fundamentals. Yet we have a Baal Shem Tov which says that very, very few people are zoichet, a merit to have all of those three brachas at once. Very few, till Mashiach comes. And I keep using the example of the three brachas. Look at the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the greatest saint that was alive in our lifetime. He had no children. He and his wife had no children. So these are brachas. Everybody at some time or other in their life are bereft of one, two, or three of them, and we have an injunction that we have to be happy, notwithstanding the lack of any of those three, or all three. So the question is, how do you do that? The question is, and we've had shiurim before, or fabringens before, I'm sure. I've certainly done it with women. I'm sure we've had shiurim on it before. That when a person makes his happiness and his contentment contingent on things happening to him, he's got a big problem, because we don't control what happens to us. So if we don't control what happens to us, we only control how we react to what happens to us, then if you don't get served up with the three brachas, or two of the three, or one of the three, or has v'shalom, none of the three, how are you going to be happy? If your happiness is responsive and it's going to be dependent on your needs being fulfilled, then if your needs aren't fulfilled, and most people on this planet, 8.5 billion people, 8.5 billion nefashos will testify that they don't have all their needs fulfilled. So how is a Jew different to other humanity in that he is expected, al pi Torah, according to what the Alter Rebbe teaches in this period, that he has to be able to adjust his happiness and his joy and his nachas on a daily basis, his full sense of fulfillment and achievement, irrespective of what happens to him. How do you do that? Says the Alter Rebbe, not only can it be done, but you are severely lacking if you don't listen to me, says the Alter Rebbe. You have to listen to this, and you have to learn it, and you have to work with it until it becomes reality. Why? Because if you don't, then if you go look in the mirror and see that person looking back at you, that person looking back at you is really saying to you, I know better than God, and it doesn't suit me that I'm sick or that my child is, God forbid, incapacitated or that I've just gone bankrupt. Who wants that? Says the Alter Rebbe, if you are saying that, you're really saying that God doesn't, either you're saying there is no such thing as Hashgacha Pratis, or you're saying that Hashem doesn't know what he's doing, or you're saying that Hashem is indifferent to your suffering in some way. And that's not how we learn. We learn, so let's go to it step by step. So, l'chaim. I'm going to give you a couple of illustrations to get a handle on what the Alter Rebbe is saying. There's a famous story amongst Hasidim about these people were Hasidim in the first generation, the same generation as the Alter Rebbe, but not Chabad. There was a Hasid called Reb Zusha of Napoli. He's very famous. He had a brother called Reb Elimelech. They were great tzaddikim, and what they did was they went on self-imposed golus. That was the thing that people did at one time in history to deal with the test of poverty. That's not our test in this generation. The Rebbe said the test in our generation is wealth, not poverty. Everybody thinks, well, I'm not as wealthy as I could be. Wrong. Compared to the Jews living throughout history, we are the richest generation that nobody freezes to death in Australia and nobody starves to death, etc., etc. So, but these two went on these self-imposed golus, and they came one night to an inn, and the inn was dominated by a whole bunch of drunken Cossacks, and they who were smashing stuff up, and the police came and arrested them all, threw them all into prison, including Reb Elimelech and Reb Zusha. There were two tzaddikim, and they're in this. You can imagine that the jail was very primitive. Everybody was in one huge room, cell, and these people were drunk and disorderly and near animal level. There was no toilet, so in the middle of the room there was a large, like a garbage tin, and everybody used that to relieve themselves. In the morning, when they woke up, Reb Zusha looks over at his brother, Elimelech, and he's crying. So he asks him why he's crying, He says, because I can't daven. I can't daven where there's a toilet, right? Where there's the odor from the toilet, and forbidden to daven. And I've never not davened first thing in the morning. I've never not said moedeani. I've never not washed nagelvas. I've never not said the brachas since I was 2 years old. So Reb Zusha says to him, brother, you don't understand. The same God that requires us to daven every day and say moedeani, is the same God who puts a toilet there and prevents it. Therefore, we are performing the mitzvah of davening by not davening. So Reb Elimelech was so impressed with this answer. He was so happy with this answer that he said, you're right. He stopped crying, he started to laugh, and then he started to dance. They took his brother and they started to dance. And then all these hungover Cossacks, they see them dance and they join in. They like the song that they're singing. They join in. Soon the whole room's dancing around. And the warden calls the guard in and says, what's going on here? And the guard says, I don't know, but they seem to be dancing around that toilet. That toilet seems to have some significance. So he said, take out the toilet. So he takes out the toilet. Reb Elimelech says, oh, now I can daven. I'm just trying to illustrate to you that Hashem is changing the cues, and we'll come in a minute to whether we understand, whether there's a code for that, whether we can ever understand it. Answer, no. Absolutely out of the question. But those cues that Hashem keeps changing, he changes for whatever reason he has, and it is our job to understand that he is changing those cues. And he is changing those cues for his reasons, and his reasons are godly reasons. And the best way for a Jew to live, explains the Alter Rebbe in this perek, is to tune in to that godliness. And it's not a matter of whether it's hot or cold, or whether it's smelly or not smelly, or whether it's this or that. In the perek, he says you have to get to the level where, in terms of Gashmias, yes and no are the same. You understand what level that is? Yes and no are the same. When Shmuley, my grandson, goes to get the burger, whether the burger's there or the burger isn't there has to be the same. Why? Because it's Ratzon Hashem. And if it's Ratzon Hashem, it's the best. You don't agree? Who cares? What sort of an instrument are you and I using to agree or not agree? We're using a human brain, which is genius creation. I'm not doubting that. But you have no chance of understanding infinity. Anything finite can't understand infinity. When we say that Hashem creates yesh ma'ayin, something out of nothing, what's the ayin? What's the nothing? Says the Rebbe, the nothing is the amount you understand your God. That's how much we understand him. Nothing. We're yesh our understanding of the yesh is nothing. That's what it is. Why? Because Hashem is infinite, and we are trying to understand with a human brain. When Hashem, for whatever reason, wants to withhold 1, 2, or 3 of those brachas, there are actually 2 pathways. And the one pathway, which needs not 8 lanes, which needs 1 billion lanes, compared to the one pathway which is a little narrow track will do, when we're talking about how many people are in both of it. If Hashem withholds brachas, most people are going to have the following reactions. one may say, hi, one may say, my luck. I've just been smashed again. This is my bad luck. They feel a victim to this, and it's understandable. You want something, you don't get it, so it's you feel victimized that you don't get it. And the more you believe in God, and the more you believe in Ashkoka Protis, at a superficial level, the more you've got to complain about, because you don't think it's just bad luck. You think it's Hashem doing it if you've done any learning. But the problem is that you're not going far enough with that learning. Certainly it's Hashem doing it, but the next step, which is the hardest step, is to say he's doing it for reasons that I don't understand. I've got to hang in there, track good, design good. I've got to think good and it will be good. And then more revealed good will materialize. That is that's easy to say. It's easy to talk, but to live like this is very difficult. But explains the Rebbe in this perek that not only is it desirable, but you only live 60, 70, 100 years in this Gilgul. And to throw it away without understanding this and without working in the spiritual gym to exercise and build muscle for this, spiritual muscle for this, is a tragedy. And not only that, but it's not a matter of just tolerating the suffering. It's a matter of actually understanding that the suffering, for whatever reason you and I don't understand, is for the good. Not only is it for the good, it's the best possible situation at this particular moment in time and space. Because if it weren't so, Hashem wouldn't be doing it. Let me tell you how difficult this is. There was a famous rabbi, I don't remember his name. Funnily enough, I was bringing with Rabbi Philman a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned this to me again, so that brings it to mind. There was a rabbi, he was very rich. He was in one of the European, was in charge of one of the big European yeshivas, and he was very rich. He was very rich in, I think it was lumber, I'm not sure. He used to teach the Mishnah. We have a Mishnah that says that anything Hashem does is for the good, and therefore you have to make a bracha on bad, just in the same way you make a bracha on good. Why? Because if you really understand this perek that we're learning together, good and bad are not what you and I judge good and bad as. Good and bad is what Hashem is doing at any particular time, and that's Ratzon Hashem, and He knows better, and all we can work with is understanding that we don't understand it, and notwithstanding that, appreciate that we're living in a godly moment. Every moment can be a godly moment, or it can be a moment in the mud. So this guy, this teacher, used to teach this to the students, and then one day, all the lumber or whatever it was disappeared. It was destroyed in some way. Overnight, he was broke, and he didn't know. And somebody had to break the news to him. So one of the students went to him and said, "Rebbe, you taught us that just you have to make a bracha on the good, just as you do on the bad. He said, yes. And he said, but what if you had something really bad? What would you do? He said, I would dance. He said, I dance when I'm happy, I dance when it's not good. So the student says to him, start dancing, So he wants to, so when he understands why, that he lost everything, he faints. When they bring him to, the students said, Rebbe, I don't understand, you've been teaching us all these years that you have to make a bracha on the bad just as the good. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, for the first time in my life, I don't understand this Mishnah. Right? But it applies to you. It's much harder to understand the Mishnah. When you're talking abstract, we're talking theory, it's all very nice. But if you are in pain, I'm in pain, God forbid, you're in pain, God forbid, to have this perspective is monumentally difficult. But it sets you apart from the whole of humanity. Because your perspective becomes completely different. Every moment of your life is deeply worthwhile. Because that's what Hashem is decreeing for you, specifically with your talents and your failings and your positives and your negatives and your nisyonis, your tests are tailored for you personally, and tuning into that, you are tuning into a private relationship with your God, which then makes you impenetrable. Because you're tuning into the godliness of the moment, not the convenience of the moment, not the gratification of the moment, but the godliness of the moment. And if you're tuning into the godliness of the moment, who's your partner in that moment? Your partner in that moment is your God. Now, we learn that you cannot understand Hashem, can't understand God. Why? Because, first of all, for the reasons we said, you can't have a finite brain understanding infinity. But that's also very abstract. Let's take some examples. Do you and I understand why it's necessary for there to be 400 billion galaxies? That's the current, I believe, the scientific belief. How they prove that, I have no idea. But the current scientific belief is, you think of our little solar system, of our planets and the sun, and you know that's got nothing to do with the stars, and each one of those stars can be a sun for its own planetary system, and the number of stars that you see in the sky are innumerable, but then let's start talking about universes, and when you have 400 billion galaxies, and we're talking about Hashgacha Pratis of every atom or every particle, in all of that, how do you get your mind around that? And if big daunts you, go small. How many germs do you think each of us carry on our skin alone? Billions of on our skin, and they all have Hashgacha Pratis. They're all running around doing what they're supposed to do. How do you and I understand that you need 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and suddenly you have this stuff, water? How do we get? We understand that water is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, but we don't understand anything beyond that. So Hashem is, and we have some fundamental pieces of Torah. We have a piece of Torah that says that there is no bad coming from Hashem. None. In other words, everything that is happening for the good. The good can be concealed or it can be revealed. We learn that revealed good is a lower level of good than concealed good. Concealed good is more powerful. I'll just give you an example from there are two Gemaras which the Rebbe analyzes in a long fabring, and it's not part of this chapter, but I'll just take you through it. There's a story in the Gemara which you probably heard many times about Rabbi Akiva, who is traveling with a donkey and a rooster and a candle. And he comes to a small town or village, town, whatever, I think it was town, and he asks whether they can put him up for the night, and they're very rude. They won't let him stay, and he could be disappointed, but he's Rabbi Akiva, so he's not. So he goes and he decides to sleep in the forest around this. There's a forest next to this town, and during the night, there's a storm, and it's a very bad storm. The candle goes out, the donkey runs away, and the chicken, I can't remember, dies, or something happens to the chicken as well. So Rabbi Akiva says, whatever Hashem does, it must be for the good. That's what he says at this point. In the morning, he goes past the town and he finds that bandits have raided the town overnight, sacked the place of all its precious valuables, and murdered most of the people there. So had Rabbi Akiva been in there, he'd have been killed. And had there not been the storm, his donkey wouldn't have run away, and the rooster would have given away his presence, or the bandits would have seen the light from the candle, or whatever it was, and it all turned out for the good. That's one level. That's one level of approaching suffering, that he suffered, but he at no point lost confidence that suffering was also going to turn out for the good. He will learn that it turns out to be good. Then there's a second story, and this is about a man called Ish Gamzu. Now this man, Ish Gamzu, he was called this by nickname because he always used to say that Gamzu L'Tova, this too is for the good. Story with him was he was a big tzaddik. He was sent by the Rabbonim in Rome to Rome to seek relief for Yerushalayim. There's a whole history with this. I haven't got time for it. And anyway, they sent him with a box, a crate of precious stones and jewels and money to try and bribe him to leave the Yidden alone, because they were being persecuted under Roman rule. So he gets to Rome, and on the way he stays at an inn, and he's robbed. And the thieves fill the case with sand, and lock it up again, so that he doesn't think that anything's happened, and he doesn't. He gets to Rome, and he brings it to Caesar, and he explains to Caesar what he wants, and he says, and for that we brought Caesar a gift, and they open the crate, and they see in the crate there's sand. So Caesar's about to execute him when there's the Gemara says an angel, Gabriel, came, and there's a couple of opinions about this, whether it was an angel or it wasn't an angel, but somebody says to the king, wait a minute, Caesar, these Jews are clever. They're not stupid. They're not going to be just bringing sand. If they bring sand, it must have some specific property. We've heard that they had an ancestor, Avram, and Avram had magic sand that turned into arrows and got rid of the enemy in this war. So Caesar says, okay, let's try. So they send the sand, and sure enough, the sand wins them some border war that they have. And Reb Nochem Ish Gamzu says when the case was open and the sand was visible, he said Gamzu Latoyo. This too is good. And the Rebbe explains in this Farbrengen the difference between the two levels. The level of Rebbe Akiva is a lower level because nobody thinks it's bad. But Rebbe Akiva doesn't feel that it's good yet, but he knows that sooner or later it'll turn out to be good because nothing that Hashem does isn't for the good. But Gamzu Latoiva, that's a different level altogether. That's when you look at the sand and you see the sand as being more valuable than the jewels. Why? Because it's happened. And the mere fact that it's happened has a preciousness and a godliness which is being driven by Hashem's Rotzen. It's very difficult. I mean, the words are easy. It's easy to understand the equation. If Hashem is bringing the world into existence every moment, as we believe, we don't believe that creation happened once, so many years ago, whatever the argument of the age is. We believe that all Gashmias, all physicality is being brought into being every microsecond. Otherwise, if Hashem wasn't bringing it into existence, it would just not exist. Nothing would exist. So if he's bringing it into existence, as we keep learning over and over again, this entails that he must be controlling it. And if there is, if you understand, we have a saying, Ein ra yored milamayla, there's no bad that comes from above. If there can be no bad coming from above, the convenience or the gratification or the lack of gratification that you and I experience, the Gashmias, is a false level. It's a level which everybody tunes into, but it's a failure to appreciate that the mere fact that Hashem is creating that at this moment, it is the best thing that can be happening at this moment. Now, this is all very well if you're talking about a burger but when you talk about hostages, the war in Israel, the Holocaust, I mean, all of this suffering that Am Yisrael's history, I keep saying it's a river of blood. We have a history of unbelievable suffering. At the same time, Am Yisrael Chai. We've outlived every other host nation. Nations come and go, they're powerful one day, nothing the next day. Am Yisrael Chai, but with a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. Now, is that pain and suffering bad? Can't be bad. It can't be. So, what is the avoider? What is the work that you have to do with yourself? Is to steadily train yourself to understand that each moment of your day and night is a moment that is being created by Hashem for you specifically, for me specifically, to be tested specifically. And if it means the denial of one or more or two or more or three or of the brachas, it means that it's for our benefit. Is that difficult? Very difficult. Not difficult to understand the words, but to live a life like this is very difficult. But just understand that if you live this life, you never would feel like a victim. You would never feel anger. Let's understand feeling anger. You know, you're driving in the street, and you're turning one way or the other, and some dumb creature who's reading his text message on his phone and probably drugged and drunk comes lurching out from nowhere, nearly hits you, and you're furious with him, right? Now, I want to ask you, at that moment you're furious with him. But when you go home and you learn your Chassidus and you learn that it's Hashgacha Pratis, this is not something that was your fault. You did nothing to create this situation. So it happened to you. If it happened to you, how can you be angry? Who are you being angry with? It was going to happen to you. Hashem has decreed it. You're going to be angry with the person that's delivering the parcel? You can, but that's stupid. You've got to be. If you're really being angry, you've got to be angry with the person that's causing you the problem. And if you're going to be angry with your God, you can't. That's a joke. And if you're not going to be angry at your God and you're going to be angry at that guy, you're really attributing that guy to that guy a power over you, which is separate from God. You understand this? I'm not saying if Kremnizer was in that situation, I wouldn't feel angry with the guy. I'm telling you what this chapter is about. This chapter is about the fact that you can't feel that anger to him because you understand that it's Hashgacha Pratis. So now the game is to work with that Hashgacha Pratis and to understand that that moment is also godliness. What do you do with it? So we can't do that in 1 week. But the first step is to understand that nothing happens to you by random happenstance. So feeling a victim is no good. Feeling angry is no good. It doesn't work. Resentful. You're resentful because somebody forgot your birthday, or somebody did something else to you, or some way you were imagined to be slighted, or left out, or neglected, or not noticed, not given enough covered. It's a serious problem if you give into it, if you live that way. It's not a matter of giving into it. Most people live this way. All of us live this way. But there is a pathway to learning not to live this way, to understand that every moment is precious and godly and being recreated with a godly intention. And if you understand that, the predicate to that is happiness. Constant happiness, irrespective of the first kind of happiness that we talked about, which is responsive to the brachas. In other words, if I'm happy, if I'm wealthy, and I have nachas from my children, and I'm healthy, I'm going to be happy. By the way, it's not often not true anyway. I mean, Elvis Presley had children. Elvis Presley had good health. And he had plenty of money, and he suicided. Well, he made it no good, but he was healthy before he took the drugs. He was healthy, and he suicides. So if you're going to make your happiness dependent on your brachas, you're very vulnerable, because if you're going to have and we've learned you don't control your brachas. Mm-hmm. So if you don't control your brachas and you're making your happiness dependent on it, you're very vulnerable to chance in your mind. Instead, explains the Rebbe in this chapter, you don't focus on your needs, because who are you to have needs? Who am I to have needs? Hashem is creating me every second. He's giving me the environment that I've got to have. The reason why are you born? You're born in order to achieve something. You're not born in order to get to Rookwood with the most toys. You're born in order to add value in some way. Now, what's going to be the orchestration of the background music for your task to add value? It's going to be different for everybody. But everybody has the opportunity of saying, I am not the victim, but the shliach. I'm the shliach. I've been empowered by God to get this job done. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in this position at this moment. And when we say Ein Oid Milvadoi, that there's nothing other than Hashem, and we say there's no place devoid of Him, what does the word place mean? It's not geography. It's a moment in time, as well as a moment in place. Where we are born, we have no choice about being born. You have no choice where you were born, when you were born, at which country you were born, which century you were born, who you're going to meet in your life. We have very limited choice in all of these things. So then, the big default position that most people err in is to then gather around him that which is going to gratify him and try and expel from his daladamas, from his immediate environment, those things that are going to hurt him. That's normal. But it's so short-sighted, explains the Rebbe in this. It's a minor piece of your story, because the main game of your story as a Jew is your relationship with your God. And your relationship with your God trumps anything that you are evaluating at any moment. How does it trump it? Because you understand that Hashem knows better. You don't understand it, so what? How can you understand it? We learn that we it's a matter of Torah that there is no understanding Hashem. So you're not going to understand it, but you can choose one. You can choose two pathways in life. Most people choose the pathway where they want to continue to accumulate as much gratification as they can and expel as much lack of gratification as they can. And that's normal. That's how Nefesh Abamis working. But the real game, the real prize, the real ability to be truthfully, totally happy all the time comes from realizing that you're sharing each of these moments with your God, one-to-one. And that's an incredible empowerment. And then everything that happens to you, if you're understanding that it's happening to you by design, by the design of your God, whose consciousness you're sharing at every moment that you possibly can, then whatever happens is good, simply because it's godly. Not finished. Just a second. Mm-hmm. You know, the Rebbe finishes this chapter with the following. He says that the more you tune into what I'm teaching you, and that's how the Rebbe talks. More, I'm talking about the elder Rebbe in this. The more you tune into that, the more you will see that things are for the good, and it is actually an energy to create revealed good. So I have to tell you that for many years I found that very puzzling, because the Rebbe spent the whole chapter saying that the revealed good's not important. You've got to learn to look beyond that. And then he says that if you look beyond that all the time, what's going to be the result? The revealed good, which he's just spent the whole chapter telling us, leave it alone. It's not the real game. So I think I understand it now. I'm going to try and explain it, but I'll just share with you a reality. You know, the Rebbe's grandfather on his mother's side, the Rebbe's mother's father was the rabbi of the town where the Rebbe was born, the famous place in Russia. His name was Meir Shlomo Yanovsky. And he was a big Rebbe, big tzaddik, and he had a shoichet called Grossman. And anyway, he contracted typhus. And at that time, typhus was a death sentence. So, and it was hugely contagious. I don't know if I'm getting the medicine right here, but this is the story that I know well, so I can't believe it wouldn't be right. And I know it from big shluchim. So he had typhus, and what they did is they sent people into these kind of hospices. They were isolated, like an isolated prison, not a prison, but an isolated place, because the typhus was was deadly and it was contagious. So they used to put people out of contact with. They had lockdown, right, for these people. So he is in this place, and he's there for 3 weeks. And every day, his shoichet, this Grossman, comes and stands under his window and says aloud this chapter. This chapter 11 of if you want to look it up, it's chapter 11 of the Igeres HaKodesh in Tanya. In fact, in the one with the English translation, it's on page 445, if you want to look it up. And he is learning this, and he goes through it every day. And every day, this Yanovsky follows the word by word. He's reading, Grossman's reading. I'm sure Yanovsky knew it off by heart anyway. There are plenty of people that know Tanya off by heart. You don't have to be Yanovsky. And he's saying the words. And within 3 weeks he was cured. And he left. And he left So that is often cited as an example of, if you transfer your focus to the fact that you're sharing these moments with your God, and therefore they must be the best, otherwise Hashem wouldn't be doing it. He's not going to do second best or third best. Therefore, the time will come about when the good in it is revealed to you. So I once talked to Rabbi Philman about this, because I was troubled about this issue. Because I was tossing up whether I should say this, because should I give you my doubts? What's the point of that? But I'm going to. You see, the problem with this chapter The problem with this chapter, if you want to go away and think about it, is that if it's so perfect, and if you're suffering, and that suffering is so tolerable because it's Ratzon Hashem, why do we daven? Can you answer me that? Why, if this is so terrific, if it's so perfect, by the way, you can't, when someone else is suffering, you can't teach him you can't, you've got to put your arm around him and give him help, right? But when we are learning this, it's for ourselves, right? So, but the question then remains, if it's all so terrific, why do we daven? You have a sick child, right? You give tzedakah and you get a Mishnah Barak and you go up to the Torah, you get the Mishnah Barak, give the tzedakah, and you ask for a refuah shalema for your child. If it was so terrific, why do you ask for a refuah shalema? If it's so terrific to lose your money, why do you pray to get it back? So Rabbi Feldman's answer to that, it's not in the Perek, I'm just telling you his answer, which satisfies me, is that we are saying to God, we understand that until now we need this test. But we've had it. So now that we've had it, and now that we get it, and now that we're not a victim, and we're not angry, and we're not resentful, and we're not, now we don't need it anymore. So take it away. So I just hope you guys that we can all do it.
But this is